Well, welcome to Warblog. Today I'm going to play another completely random game because I haven't made any games up recently. But it's not going to be on one of these because I still suspect there are these embarrassingly open ones that I'm not thinking about. So it's not one of these. I've been stuffed with so many things that I've had to do. Let's try 32. But one of the things I was looking at, I had to rebuild a server. And, so I've done it on the same platform that this is on, and I was looking at the capacity, and this is plodding along quite well. I mean, it helps that I never plays it, but it plods along quite well. It's never gone outside its working capacity, which is like 20% of its capacity. It's got a burstable capacity that takes it up to 80. I mean, if you go over sort of 60, 70, 80, the server will start to do things, but 20 is like an operational capacity, and it's never gone above that. And it's been there for over a year now, I think. So anyway, that was something else. I have no idea what I want to play. I'm pretty sure I've played this one. Look, maybe I should find one that I haven't played. I mean, I have played a lot of them. Let's try 47. Tempted to do this one. This is actually a real battle, and it's a crappy map. I sort of put it together. You throw these things together, and you sort of think, well, this is literally how it describes the situation. Essentially coming from three sides. Maybe I could make this valley a little less like that, but when you look at it, it just looks so unconvincing, I think is the word. It doesn't look like a military situation. It looks like some sort of abstract form of pixel art. And I'd like to do it because it's actually a really important battle, and I think it would justify a much bigger map. I've played it before as well, actually. I'm actually tempted to do it. I've got a video up for it. Yeah, look. Video. I'm not doing another one. Not that I'm opposed to doing ones where I've played the video before, but I think, let's try 53. Let's have to remember some of these. I feel like playing this one. I know I've played it before. There, look. The reason I want to play it is because it's a big map. There's not a lot of counters, so it's clear that there's going to be some sort of movement involved with it. Sort of a more thinking game, I think. Because that alphabet one would have been just a counter crunch, I don't know what you call it, but a click fest type, I don't feel like doing that. To give you a clue, it's just gone like, well, depends on what time zone you want to use, really. I use my UK time. It's 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm not up early. I'm going to bed late. I'm feeling quite good actually, which is strange. I've no idea. I guess it's these guys. It's these guys when they've got to get these objectives. But I remember playing it, and it'd be interesting to see how it changes because this artillery can't move and fire. But obviously, helicopters are a little more sensitive than they were when I would have put this together. I do like this map, but I think it could be really improved with some contours, which I'm not going to do. I'm sort of tempted to do it, but I'd have to click on each one. Drop down list 1, drop down list 2, drop down list 1, drop down list 1, drop down list 1, drop down list. You have to click them. That would. I couldn't do the whole map. There's so much of it. I'd fall asleep at the end of that. So let's see what we got. I think what we've got to do is define some sort of strategy so that we're conscious. This is why I always think about these games. It's no point just playing it. You've got to say, okay, the whole point is to challenge yourself to say in the first place, I understand what this game is about and what I've got to do. I keep saying this again in the game, but it seems to work. I mean, it's a complaint, it's a criticism of other players, other people when they see their videos. They get a video and then they just start playing it. Well, that's the tempting thing. I'll just start. Oh, I've got some units here. Sometimes they don't even know what they've got. They start moving half the things and they realise they've got something else that they didn't know about. Oh, look, there's some interesting stuff, they say. Which I think, well, you can't play a game like that. Or at least that's, and they all hide behind this concept of strategy games, war games, but they're not. Sometimes you see people do some planning, and sometimes you can spot people that are thinking in those lines, even if they're not necessarily doing it overtly. But when you see a lot of these younger players and they get these games, I don't want to name any, but they're big ones, the really mainstream ones, hex and counter games, mostly Second World War, involving thousands of counters. They just sort of they're just clicking around, and the thing is, my strategy or my ethos behind developing this game is based primarily, although I don't really like the time and space that it comes from, because I didn't really like where I was, especially in retrospect, but and I always have to qualify that because I don't. I was in a stupid place, not a dark place or anything. It was just anyway. This is beside the point. I used to play a lot of war games, and the point I was getting to is there was always this sort of there was this build up to something, and then it would be, you'd be thinking about where you can move your counters, and when you got, as things built up, the consideration would become more and more focused on the moving the counters and what you can do with the counters. There was never this sort of clickfest attitude that you get with these with these computer war games. And I think it's important that and what you see there is, and what you feel and what you sense is the sort of the people are watching what you're doing, and that's what's lacking, I think, in a lot of these games. When they're playing against an artificial intelligence, the artificial intelligence isn't watching what the other person does. And there's a game being designed at the moment by someone who's big on artificial intelligence, and it's a big pile of crap. But I sent him an email and I said, listen, you'll never ever be able to compete with a human player. And he said, no, my artificial intelligence is fantastic. And I just thought he was full of shit. And I said, look, you can't bluff. An artificial intelligence can't bluff. It can't do things because it knows who you are and how you might work. it's quite difficult to bluff, and I think the bluffing is, and it's not just the bluff, it's the whole remit of all the other things that you could do. For example, you could play a game, and I played lots of games in my life, and I really enjoy them. And the things that you remember are not the moving of the counters. It's the way that the strategies plan out and the decisions that you make to do things, and basically the way it's beyond your capability to comprehend completely. You have to make assumptions and determinations. But what I'm trying to get to is, I might, on the sort of theme of bluffs and things, I might sort of move all of these units this way, like that. Now my units are troops, and if I was to move them all here, the other person might think, he's going to try and come around this way, and they might move all their units this way to combat that, for example. Now, what we've sort of seen there is not two units just steaming into each other, but almost engaging in a sort of a dance. And what you might do then is you can say, well, you've got him to commit to sort of moving in this direction. Now, it's not a good example because it probably wouldn't work, because they could just move back. They're far more dynamic. But then, whilst this has moved off the road, for example, and they're there, and there, we could then push him into a blocking position there, and then shoot him along the road, and him along the road, so to speak, if they could get that far. I'm not saying they could, but I'm just talking about, I'm useless at these colours. So you can start moving along like that, and really sort of pushing this way as they've moved to there, because this unit would be here. And so you've bluffed him to move somewhere by making him think that you've moved anywhere. And this happens time and time again in battles. Every time I read, many battles, but every time I read the things about the Iran-Iraq War, and it's been so long since I've done anything. It's not bloody Middle East current events. It's frustrating because I just don't have time at the moment, and I don't even know where the time goes. I think I spend most of the time sleeping, really. But every time you read about the Iran-Iraq War, the battles always start off with a feint attack, and that feint attack that I was talking to. I didn't talk to him. I sent him an email, an email exchange. I said your artificial intelligence will never be able to do a bluff, a feint attack, and it's actually very hard to do in a war game because people can see it. They'll say, "Well, I know you're not going to do that because I can see all your counters are down here." And these are things that you get all these games and they say, "Oh, it's really realistic. Oh, we've got advanced logistics, advanced fog of war, this and that." Now, I mean, you can have mechanics that allow you to sort of maybe try and model feint attacks and bluffs, but I'm not thinking that readily, in the sense that I can't say one way or another whether they do exist, but I don't think they probably do, because I don't think it's that easy to do. And you can't do it really in a war game, but in war, that's one of the things that happens. I mean, so if you've got this sort of, this game, it's going to be really hard to sort of just attack here and then get them to sort of think, oh, they're attacking in strength here, and to pour all your resources down there to defend it, and then when they've done that, because your bluff has worked, then to move all your greater resources across this river like that. That's never going to happen because it's a game. And these are things that, when these other games, they purport to be realistic and all these sorts of things, they don't. They fail in so many other things. I mean, that's another thing about these games where they say, oh, we're so realistic, we've got all this stuff, we cover all these things, all these issues. When you consider war, there are so many things they don't cover. I mean, the thing is, one of the things a war blog covers is refugees, the generation of refugees and the movement of refugees. And I don't do it particularly well in the grand sense, but it certainly gives you enough to sort of consider the issue of refugees. I've never seen a war game that allows you to storm through Europe without generating massive caravans of refugees and people fleeing war zones. And this is another thing that's, it is a major consideration, for any war, because the roads get blocked up. It's hard to distinguish between refugees and enemy units. And these are things that are fairly fundamental in war. I'm not sure how much. I think it would have to be very specific to the situation. I mean, it would only happen right at the beginning of any particular surprise initiative. I mean, for example, in the Libya conflict at the moment, I mean, the front lines are fairly static. They're not producing massive caravans of convoys of refugees right at the moment. I mean, there are people being displaced, but until the front line moves in any sort of significant way, or I mean, maybe at the moment because things are getting a bit hotter around the airport and things, but it's not going to be creating that sort of thing. Whereas I think when they were sort of putting a lot of pressure on Idlib, the M5, M4 highway, I think they produced about 100,000 refugees. They all went the other way. But even so, it's an effect. But the thing is, all I'm saying is, well, I don't know what I'm saying now. Actually, I've sort of lost the plot. Really, I was just talking about the realism of war games, and in particular, the sort of artificial intelligence and the inability to sort of cover some of the things that I think make historic accounts more interesting. One thing actually is to just mention is nothing to do with this. I've been doing some reading in certain things that I do, and the time period that I'm reading is 1950 at the moment, and it's really weird basically newspapers, looking at newspaper headlines about the Korean War, and it's the Busan area, and it was troops cross the river come. Well, I've got that scenario. 17,000 new recruits being sent to Korea. Well, that sounds familiar because that's the sort of the early stages that I've covered, and it just struck me that 10,000 of those die on the first day. Well, these are American ones, and I'm pretty sure that they was talking about Yanks going there, and it just seemed to me that when I was reading that, I was reading the actual real-time sort of narration of the course of events. In those newspapers, I mean, when those newspapers were read, they would have been that very day. I mean, I don't think you could send 17,000 troops somewhere, really, for anything, really. I mean, not these days. I mean, it's very much sort of, maybe an entire army, but, I mean, this is like just a couple of regiments, etc., etc. But it was quite interesting, and that's another thing that I really want to start doing more of, and I really enjoyed doing it, is actually creating the battles from newspaper reports. And I did think of keeping them and printing them out, and that's one thing I do want to do, which is really more part and parcel of the War Blog journal project that I've got going on, which I've done nothing with at all. But building up a sort of kind of historical account based on newspaper articles on the course of the war, because a lot of these wars, they're not really particularly well written up. in any particular sort of way at all. I mean, most books, they tend to sort of mix heavily the politics, the geopolitical interests of the war, the grand strategies of major initiatives such as, the crossing of the River Kum, the Pusan, defense of Pusan, the Incheon landings and things like that. But what the newspapers, they tend to do, that they'll say today there was a major push by the 6th Corps across this, and they're quite specific to the kinetics of it. Whereas any book that you read is generally quite often at a completely different level, and more often than not is just accounts of other people that were in the war, a soldier's account. It's no interest to me, etc., etc. So anyway, with regards to this, getting back to this, I think it's important to decide what we're going to do. That's what I started off with, and that's the whole point of this. And I don't know really, because the thing is, what I was trying to hint at and guess at is that I could maybe try a feint or something. What am I supposed to do here? I mean, there's no chance of a feint because obviously I know exactly where I am, so I can't assume that. What I can assume is that I'm going to be numerically superior, and that he's probably going to flee. Now, I don't know what I'm going to do, because I'm trying to narrate as well, you see. That's one of the problems with talking on the video. It's weird. I would say it's like driving and talking. You can't really do both properly, but many people would do and do. But if I wasn't talking, I might be able to sort of think exactly what I'm doing, but exactly what I might want to do. But what I think would be a good idea would be to somehow push this unit over the river. So we've got a task force there, and these people can then move that way. And then these ones, we can hold him in the centre as really more of a blocking force, and then these ones to actually just concentrate them to take this bridge. Now, what I've got there now, you see, is a strategy. Now, there's a famous writer. He wrote On War. I can never remember who it is. I used to remember. I started to read all the books. I stopped for some reason. But in some of his writings, he basically says there's no such thing as genius in war. There's no such thing as being incredibly clever. Most of the things are dictated by the situation and are just the bleeding obvious. They say, this military commander was a genius for turning a flank. Well, the thing is, the situation probably dictated that. Probably wasn't the sort of the genius that historians will try to make it out. So what I'm saying here is that there's probably not a lot really that you can do to make, there probably aren't sort of some really stupid strategies, and on the other hand some really good strategies. I would think that there's more competence than brilliance, as long as you can do things competently. And I think that would maybe is one of the tests of playing a war game, and having the ability to maintain a sort of degree of intellectual stamina over a long period of time with not so much a complex set of rules, but a complex set of I don't want to just call them units, parameters, to keep it a little more abstract. So you're using there's lots of things going on here, and I think that might be a sort of a better way to assume the intellectual challenge and benefits of a war game. I'm going all over the place there now, and I can feel that. But what I'm saying is, well, for example, I just had to rebuild a server for a fairly critical thing for my own use, and because I'm already tired and I got so much stuff to do, it dawned on me that was I still actually even able to do it? And I was, and it's quite complex, and I don't do them that much, but it's pretty advanced stuff that involves a lot of command line programming that is just really obscure. And it's one of these things, and it wasn't that difficult. I only did it. It only took me about 3 or 4 hours. But the thing is, it's so complex that you sort of look at it and you think, well, one day I won't be able to do that. One day my mind won't work that well. And because it's complex, I can always maybe go out into the garden and do some digging, to put in some plants or do some weeding. These are simple things that don't require a great deal of intelligence or cognitive power, mental discipline. But these sort of games do. So you've got to say, well, the challenge is really maintaining some momentum on that. And I think a lot of war games would probably think that they're quite good, but might not necessarily be quite good. A lot of people, I think, they master the mechanics of processing something, but they never, and they feel clever. It's one of the things I've noticed about. It's one of the things I've noticed about people that do the tabletop hex encounter games. You get this video and they've clearly just set up a table. Now I've got one war game. I bought it because I wanted to try it, and it's rubbish. It's the Arab-Israeli Wars. It looks really impressive. It's a really old one, like an SPI game, and I can't figure it out. I don't know how to play it. And I played the very, very early one that had about 20 counters in completely, I think, or maybe 30 counters in total. And it took me like 2 days to set that up. And you get these people and they set up like a huge game. And the thing is, they've got hundreds of counters. And I think the thing is, the process of setting these things up gives you a sense of satisfaction. And I think it's a false sense of satisfaction, because they set the game up and their mind is already exhausted from this mental process of finding counters, identifying counters, placing them on the board. I'm not saying that there is. All I'm trying to suggest and push forward is the idea of mental fatigue. For example, I'm tired at the moment, and so it may be having an effect. But mental fatigue isn't just sort of like in the short term, it's also in the long term and in the inherent term. I'm going to say that in the long term, it means you can have a good idea, but can you play that through? Can you maintain that strategy? Can you maintain that intellectual discipline throughout? And that could be the test of a war game, as I said before. But in the in the sort of, well, I can't remember what I was saying now. The long term, in the short term. The other term I was trying to sort of come up with was the that was just what I was talking about. Then I have to rewind the video to figure out what I was saying. Is long term, throughout a person's life, not just from game to game. But the thing is, if you set a game up and it takes you 4 or 5 hours, you're going to have almost fatigued yourself mentally with that process. And I think that I think that what I was getting to right at the beginning was when you play a game, you're supposed to be sort of thinking, you know, what is happening? So, for example, I know I've already defined my strategy. I'm not even going to try and think of another one because I didn't have time. But what I do have to do is to figure out what he's got, and we haven't done that. So we've got some irregulars, we've got some fast-moving armour over there. Irregulars, mechanized irregulars. But look, he's got some artillery, and he's got rockets. I mean, there's a big stack in there. It's an illegal stack. He's got rockets and artillery. But that's it. So I've got air power, and that might be worth taking this out. But we've got an issue of indirect fire. But there's only 2 units. Above and beyond that, I don't think there's anything to worry about on this table. But what the point I was trying to get to is, you're sort of thinking, well, what is he going to do with his units? And so instead of just moving things, you're trying to think about what he's actually going to do. So we've already determined what our strategy is. So we've got 2 things on top of this now to ask. We've got to say, well, what is his response going to be to that strategy? And what is his response going to be to whatever strategy we might play? So, for example, if we do that move, he'll probably maybe move these just to face these off and these over here. Let's say, for example, he might move this down here, hold with that, bring this over here, this over here, this to this bridge line, and try and hold some advance or falling line there. This holding here, and this coming over to defend against this line. You know, that could be his strategy or his response to that move. But then you've got to think, well, what else could he do? So, I mean, what are the other options? I mean, how about he just pulls everything back straight away? That would be an option. And then just form a heavy line across there, a heavy line there, and a heavy line there. So you could almost form a line. I mean, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So he can easily create that line that we've just discovered there, a solid line with a large reserve and artillery. Maybe that's what you'd want to do. But the thing is, I think what you've got to sort of come to terms with or realise, and I'm not saying that most war gamers don't do this, but especially when you see these people playing the artificial intelligence, they don't have a grand strategy. They just know that they've got to pound against something. There's a game called, I don't like to refer to games, other sort of board games, and I don't know what these things are called. They've got a term, it's like OCS. I don't even know what it means, but I think it's something to do with some sort of operational strategy, operational something, OSI, or something like this. And apparently it's sort of part of a theme of a lot of games. But one of the games I've seen some videos of is called, I'm pretty sure it's called Reluctant Enemies, but I might be wrong on that. But I think it's in the Second World War. but it's set in Israel, so it's like Palestine, and it's the French versus the Israelis, I think, but it might be something else. It might be the French versus the Palestinians or something. And in there, it's very much sort of all about supply and movement, and even putting tanks onto tank loaders and driving them down roads and things. And you've got this massive map, but only about 20 counters, and it's a real sort of moving things around type game, and then deciding where you're going to be. And that's what you lack in a lot of these hex and counter games, because it doesn't actually allow you to do the things that you might do in these more traditional tabletop games. For example, these Second World War games, they're just a huge solid mass of units that you're moving your units against. Army Group North, Army Group South, Army Group Centre. It's just a wall of units, and I think that not so much the appeal, but part and parcel of how that's actually working is because it makes the game playable, because you can't mess it up. If you had a game that was more dynamic, it would be a lot easier for a person to mess things up, maybe to sort of just do something completely stupid. I think one of the games that I quite enjoy is in the real world that offers the sort of a truer sense of the dynamics of movement is Napoleon's Last Battles. Although, to be quite honest, I've played it a few times, and I think in retrospect, you've got to do the same strategy. But you keep thinking, well, how can I do this different? Can I force this way, or can I force that way? You have choices that are, of course, these are strategic choices to some extent. I mean, there might be tactical choices, but generally, the more off the beaten track you go, the more likely to just mess up and fail. But that's sort of irrelevant, really. I think that that's not, that important in this sort of this consideration. All I'm sort of saying is, I think that you can almost play a game just by thinking and considering the strategy and say, okay, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So I think we're going to assume that the other player is going to play a responsive defense. And responsive defense would be to put up as big a defense based on the movement of the other player as they can, with taking minimal losses, as opposed to pulling back like this or trying to counterattack in some way. So anyway, let's see what we can do. Now, artillery can only move one hex, which is a pain. So that's something we didn't fully comprehend. And that's the fact that a lot of these units are not really going to be going anywhere very fast at all. So we didn't contemplate that one. So I'm going to try and move him to join this task force on this side of the river. Well, that's my first move. Plenty of air, so what do I want to do with that? I think what I'm going to try and do is blow that up, because he should be out of his air defense range. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, possibly in it. Let's just see. Yep, no air defense there. So his strategy might also be to put himself into air defense range. Okay. So what do? We've already considered it from the Popular Mobilization Force side, but what do we actually do with these units now? Because they're not very strong. See, what I'm tempted to do, and I suggested a responsive defense, but what I'm tempted to do, this is interesting, because I'm assuming a strategy here. I'm assuming that these units have come across the river, with these ones coming here, because this task force is going to come down this way. Now that's a strategic type of action. Now, strategy is things like Napoleon trying to hit two forces separately, not allowing them to get together, like the British and the Prussians. Now, what we could do here, it appears, or we might be estimating and thinking, that these units are going to come down this way and then try and come down here in some way. I mean, why don't they just go that way? I don't know. Maybe they're trying to come around this way. But because I'm not going to play much more. I've talked a lot. I'm tired, and it's nearly 50 minutes, 43 minutes. But what I could do is create a little task force, obviously including that. Bring them down here, because I might be able to get enough units down here to start attacking these units. Now these ones look a bit tough. There's high density, quite a lot of them. But as these come across the river, I might be able to attack them. I mean, essentially there's only 2 units. But at the same time, what we've got is this complication of maneuverability, or lack of it, because we can't get anywhere very quickly because there's no roads. Hence a big map, and that's why I played it. It's a bit disappointing, really. I've just done nothing but talk. But I think to some extent, just looking at this as it stands, is tantamount to everything that I enjoy about this sort of stuff. You can do such a fine number of movement, and you sort of think, well, what does it look like now? What does this mean? How does this change the situation? Where we've lost some manpower there, but that's it. I think one thing that might have changed in this game since when it was first put together is the fact that artillery can't move and fire. So it's moving so slowly that we can almost keep out of its range all the time. It's only the air power that has any sort of remote impact, but I could push these units down here. I'm going to try that. I mean, look at him. He's, does he want to stay there to protect that objective? I'm going to try and counterattack down here and defend over here. Okay. So what we've got over here. Okay. So what I've now done is swayed the balance with these units. We've now got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units that can possibly come down this way with a weaker line up here, but we're defending across this river. 8 units against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've got more units. Some of them are stronger. So we've only had one turn. It still says turn 1. And yet we've made a lot of decisions and changed the intricate geography of it all. We've only had one battle, and everything else has been movement. I mean, we've not done a lot because it's not two turns, but I think, and I don't want to keep slagging down other games because that's sort of what it always boils down to. But I think what I'm actually doing is refining and also I'm precipitating the essence of what makes a game fun for me. This is what's making it fun. Just sort of like this sort of consideration of, well, what does this mean now? And I'm not very good at games. You've got to bear that in mind. I mean, I always say that. Just because it's like this thing about putting the server together or setting up a war game, you sort of enjoy it, so you think you're good at it. But I've spoken to people, and you start to realize, well, what is a sharp mind? A sharp mind. It's a phenomenal thing, because intelligence. I'm big on intelligence, and you sort of start to think, well, I'm getting old, and I'm sort of more aware of my loss of mental agility, so to speak. But I still think I still got it. But you suddenly start to look, eyesight. You start to lose it. You think, oh my God, what if I actually went blind? What if I could stop thinking? But you've got to realise that there are people out there with super sharp eyesight, and you can't comprehend it because you can't see. Everything's a blur for yourself. There are people out there with super sharp minds, younger people, and they can do things, and you just, wow, I didn't, it's unbelievable these people can do certain things. I mean, they're not necessarily always amazing, but so it's always sort of, doing these things with that sort of understanding that you're maybe not necessarily thinking of all the angles, but it's the pushing of against that boundary of trying to think of all the angles that is enjoyable. I couldn't even comprehend what a superior mind might have already thought of. They might have in their mind's eye already some kind of appreciation for how far these units can move in 2 turns, and I've not even considered that. So let's do one more PMU turn. So again, they've fallen back, so here we can advance. But we'll think about that in a second. We've got this guy here. So artillery can move quite a way down a road. Okay. So we've got another DE, but no more movement. Okay. Now things have changed slightly. Now have we appreciated that? What I'm trying to say is, have we appreciated that there's this massive force there? Do we feel confident over here? And in particular, where do we want to commit our air power? We attacked this last time. What we could do is put the helicopters on this at the very least, and hopefully destroy them. Nothing. So what we've got here is a future position that we can almost predict and then state, how serious is this? What is it going to look like in 2 turns? Because what we got is this bundle of units, which I like to call task force or battle groups. This bundle of units, which is obviously going to form a defensive line along that river. This one, which is going to attack over here, giving us these units to face that off, these units to come down here, and this little guy all in his own to take out this central area. So it'll be him and him facing each other off. But he's got artillery, so he'll probably run away. So there we have it. I'm not going to do any more because I'm so tired. I wish I hadn't talked and maybe played a bit more. But I'm glad I picked this game out. Definitely. This was exactly what I felt like doing right now, and I hadn't thought about it. But when I first started it, I thought it was quite clearly in the PMU favour. But now I'm not sure. And I think maybe a lot of it comes down to the use of artillery. And I think after having played it, there are other things I've tried to sort of bear in mind the considerations. And that's why you model war games, because you play it and then you realise that there are things you didn't know. Now, there's no point in going to war and then realising, oh, if only we'd done this. If you could spend, even a couple of hours modelling what you think you're going to do, and obviously you want to try and get your modelling system as near as damn it to whatever it is you're trying to model. But on this, for example, what I'm trying to get to here is what I might have been better off doing is to try and consolidate all my artillery to travel along roads, because it's going so slowly. I can move 3 hexes along a road, or 1 hex through the desert. And so that means that, what I've done here is probably quite right, but these units are going to spend forever before they get anywhere near the enemy. 1, 2, 3, 4. He's out of range. 1, 2, 3. He can sit there next to them and blow them up. But it's maybe all about considering at that level what to do with the artillery, because we've got a lot of it. We've got at least 3, 4, 5, 6 artillery pieces. We could have actually concentrated them all up on one side. But yeah, I think that's interesting. I'm going to leave it at that. Hopefully I'll be able to get some sleep. Just feel like saying I really enjoyed that, because I did, and it seems a shame that I've got to sort of end. But everything's against that as an option. I'm tired. There's only 2 minutes, 10 seconds left. And my voice isn't going to work much longer. But yeah, phenomenal. Okay, well, I'll speak to you later. Cheerio.